This is the first autofocusing lens that Seven Artisans has created, and it is a full frame 50mm f1.8. And I know what you're thinking, do we really need another 50mm full frame lens? Because there are literally, it seems like hundreds of them. And it makes sense that this is their first release because I think 50mm is probably still the most popular full frame focal length for a prime. So why not start with a 50mm? Now, the thing that really is important and why I think that this review is valuable is that this thing is remarkably cheap. It comes in at just about $200 US, which is an incredible value if it's any good. So let's get into it. It comes in a white box. Inside you get a user manual, a USB-C cable, some padding, and the lens itself. Plastic front and rear lens caps, and a plastic lens hood. But that's almost where the plastic ends. This lens is constructed out of metal or aluminum and glass, yet it feels pretty light in the hand. Weight is 420 grams, and the design is about as mundane as it gets. It is a semi-glossy black color that will match up well to about 98% of black cameras out on the market. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronic connections, a USB-C port for firmware updates, and no weather sealing gasket. In fact, this lens is not weather sealed at all. Moving up, there is a flimsy feeling autofocus manual focus switch, a declicked and extremely stiff aperture ring that moves from f1.8 to f16 and then further into A or auto aperture. A little 50mm f1.8 printed here and a Seven Artisans logo on the other side. Up next is the manual focus ring, which is equally as stiff as the aperture ring. It's electronic, but again, very stiff and not that grippy. So I don't think that you'll be pleased with it if you are buying this lens to manually focus. Fortunately, most people will probably never have to touch this ring. Around the front, there is a pretty small front lens element, lens specs, Seven Artisans logo, minimum focus of 0.5 meters, and a 62mm filter thread. Inside, there are 11 elements in 9 groups and an 11-bladed diaphragm. And as for the autofocus, I don't have any specs on that, but it is fairly quiet. I'll discuss that later. Mounted on my Sony a7C, this is a big and long 50mm lens. I would have preferred for this lens to be smaller, but as a first autofocusing lens, I guess they needed the space to cram everything in. It looks perfectly fine though, and although it is an all-metal lens, it doesn't make for a heavy setup at all. So the question now becomes, is it any good? So I took it out on my Sony a7C, and I snapped a couple of portraits, a couple of other random shots, and here they are, all straight out of the camera, unedited, uncorrected, unprocessed, no fancy filters, just as they come out with this lens. Ready, set, go. Alright, so the performance is quite good. In the center of the frame wide open, you get plenty of sharpness, good colors, good contrast levels. Even wide open, the corners aren't that soft. They are softer than the center of the frame, but still pretty good, although they are a little bit darker. Vignetting is definitely noticeable with this lens. Chromatic aberration performance is a bit of a weak point, as you can see here wide open, but as you stop this lens down, this does go away. Pretty typical, I would say average performance. Barrel distortion and pincushion distortion is well controlled. The image looks flat to me with straight lines. Flaring is also not bad, although it does come into the frame if your bright light source is just outside of the frame. So optically, I would describe this lens's performance as above average. Now let's talk about autofocus performance because, well, I was expecting this to be terrible. I don't know if that was just me being kind of pessimistic, about these newer lenses coming out with autofocus, but I was pleasantly surprised with this one. Now, I'm not saying that this lens is going to rival Sony G Masters, but I will say that for photos, I had fewer problems with this lens than Sony's own 50mm f1.8. The focus accuracy is excellent, it's quick, it's nearly silent, and as long as your subject doesn't move as quickly as a distracted child, you should be just fine. And it also does a fine job of tracking slower subjects in video. I wouldn't recommend this for action sports, but for the occasional video here or there, it's more than adequate. There is some focus breathing, so if you are planning on shooting an indie film, this lens probably isn't the tool for the job. But again, overall, I am impressed, especially for a first-time effort from 7 Artisans. And more especially for the price, which is around $220 US, but let's call this a $200 lens. For $200, if you shoot full frame Sony E-mount, there's not a lot of good stuff out there. There are a lot of manual lenses, but if you're looking at autofocus lenses, those are harder to come by. And if you're looking for one with great optics, that's kind of tough to find. And if you're looking for one with all metal construction, it's kind of hard to find. This lens kind of combines all three of those things: decent optics, good autofocus performance, in a decent build quality, minus that autofocus manual focus switch, which I'm not a fan of. Do I think this lens is too big? Yes. Do I dislike the really stiff aperture and focus rings? Yes. Do I absolutely hate the autofocus manual focus switch, which is too cheap feeling and easily flipped while using this lens just casually? Absolutely. But am I impressed at the images that I was able to get with this $200 lens? Absolutely. For the money, I don't know how you can go wrong. This is optics and performance that I would have expected from a Viltrox lens, not a 7 Artisans. In fact, Viltrox does sell a 50mm f1.8 autofocus lens, but that's $380, which is almost double the price of this 7 Artisans. Again, I don't know of another lens in the $200 price point that's full frame autofocus, good optics, decent build, that could beat this one for the money. I don't think that it exists up until this point in history. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Again, if you're interested in this lens, if you want to read more about it, check pricing, check if there are coupon codes. Links to that will be down in the description, so definitely check that out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.